It was an icy dawn on February 16, 1945. The Japanese fleet, led by the aircraft carriers Ise and Hyuga, sailed through the cold, gray waters, carrying their precious cargo, oil vital to Japan's dwindling war effort. But the quiet of the morning was shattered by the ominous hum of sonar. Danger was closing in. A U.S. submarine, hidden beneath the waves, had locked onto their convoy. The crew of the Ise felt their blood run cold. Suddenly, the first torpedo streaked toward them, cutting through the water with lethal speed. Shouted orders and the metal clang of boots on steel filled the air above the battleships. The ship lurched violently to the side, the hull groaning in protest as it narrowly avoided the attack. Before the Japanese could even process the close call, another torpedo came. Faster, stealthier. The crew braced, hearts pounding in their throats. The ship veered hard once again, and it missed, just barely. Relief was short-lived. A third torpedo screamed through the water, then another, each whistling by, so dangerously close. Sweat dripped down the faces of the men, terror etched in their eyes. One more was coming. A desperate departure. By 1944, Allied submarines had choked Japan's supply lines, severing oil shipments from Southeast Asia and crippling imports of vital resources. Japan's oil reserves were nearly depleted, and U.S. submarines had destroyed numerous warships, including the battleship Congo, 7 carriers, and 9 cruisers. Facing total isolation by early 1945, Japanese planners devised desperate measures, supplementing dwindling tanker shipments by loading oil drums onto freighters and even 2 Ise-class battleship aircraft carriers, the Ise and Hyuga. These were heavily armored hybrid battleship carriers with up to 12 inches of belt armor and armed with 14-inch guns, 5-inch dual-purpose guns, and torpedo tubes. Each could carry up to 20 aircraft after conversion, though their flight decks were limited in size and capacity compared to dedicated carriers. Admiral William F. Halsey's U.S. Third Fleet had been raiding the South China Sea, relentlessly searching for the elusive Japanese fleet. Yet, despite Americans' efforts, the Ise and Hyuga slipped through the grasp of U.S. warships, unseen, undeterred. On February 6th, the fleet departed Linga Roads, arriving in Singapore the following day to load its cargo. Ise sustained minor damage after hitting an Allied mine and received temporary repairs. The ships were loaded with vital supplies. Hyuga took 4,944 drums of aircraft fuel, 326 drums of motor fuel, and 440 oil workers. Ise carried 5,200 drums of aircraft fuel and 551 oil workers. The light cruiser Oyoto was loaded with tin, tungsten, rubber, zinc, and aircraft fuel. Now aptly named the Completion Force, these makeshift transports, departing from Singapore, symbolized a last-ditch effort to sustain the war effort as Allied forces tightened their grip on Japan's shrinking empire. Rear Admiral James Fife, Jr., commander of Allied submarines in the Southwest Pacific, was determined to stop Ise and Hyuga from reaching Japan. He deployed 15 submarines from Task Force 71 along their path. It was a diverse array of U.S. submarines, including Gato-class, Balao-class, and Tambora-class ships, all equipped with advanced sonar systems and torpedoes, with crews specially trained for long-range reconnaissance and high-speed attacks on enemy surface vessels. A daring, coordinated assault was set into motion, with the U.S. Navy and USAAF working together with the British Royal Navy to strike the Japanese ships before they could escape. Bracing the gauntlet. Under a shroud of tropical night, on February 10, 1945, the Japanese Completion Force slipped out of Singapore's harbor, their timing calculated to exploit an impending weather front for concealment. The air buzzed with tension as the convoy, a critical lifeline for Japan's embattled naval power, set a course for the coastal Japanese city of Kure, a crucial base for the Imperial Navy. Shadowing them in the murky depths, the British submarine HMS Tantalus prowled, its sonar pinging faint echoes of the departing fleet. This T-class boat was equipped with advanced sonar for detection and had a complement of 4 bow torpedo tubes capable of launching 21-inch torpedoes designed for stealthy, high-speed strikes against enemy warships. At dawn on February 11th, Tantalus spotted the Japanese ships departing port. With precision, it surfaced, targeting the fleet with torpedoes. Just as it launched, a Japanese reconnaissance aircraft appeared, diving toward the submarine. The plane unleashed a barrage, forcing Tantalus to dive deep to evade the incoming fire. As it descended into the depths, the crew sent a contact report to Allied command. The attack had failed, but the pursuit was far from over. On February 12th, at precisely 1:45 p.m., the submarine Char picked up the Japanese completion force on radar 9 miles away. A tense silence filled the control room as the captain transmitted the contact report. An hour later, Blackfin locked onto the convoy at 15 miles, triggering a frantic hunt. For 14 grueling hours, U.S. submarines Blackfin, Char, Flounder, Pargo, and Tuna tore through the depths, their sonar scanning desperately, periscopes slicing through the water's surface. Each submarine closed in, hoping for a clear shot, but the Japanese fleet's flawless coordination and blistering speed kept the targets out of reach. Meanwhile, farther north, the U.S. submarines Guavita, Hake, and Pompanito remained poised, waiting for an opening that never came. The Japanese ships moved undetected with chilling precision, slipping like ghosts through the water, their escape growing more certain with each passing minute. By February 12th, U.S. AAF patrols had locked their radar onto the completion force, shadowing the Japanese convoy. High above the churning South China Sea, aircraft equipped with cutting-edge radar systems tracked the fleet's every move, their crews alert and bracing for action. The tension broke at dawn on February 13th when an Allied strike force roared into the skies. Massive consolidated B-24 Liberators, long-range heavy bombers with a payload capacity of 4,000 pounds, led the assault. They were escorted by 40 B-25 Mitchells, versatile medium bombers with twin engines and 12 50 caliber machine guns. Protecting them were 48 P-51 Mustangs, high-performance fighters with long-range capabilities and 6 50 caliber machine guns. As the aircraft rendezvoused over the open sea, heavy cloud cover rolled in like an impenetrable shroud. The bombers, carrying their lethal payloads, scanned desperately for their targets, but the skies betrayed them. With radar-guided bombing forbidden to prevent friendly fire on Allied submarines prowling below, the strike group was forced to turn back. Frustration gripped the crews as the Japanese convoy remained untouched. Pursuit under fire. On February 13th, the hunt for the completion force escalated as Allied submarines attempted daring attacks along the convoy's route. The Balao-class submarines, Burgle, Blower, and Guitarro, lay in wait, their crews tense in the confined steel corridors. At 12:30 p.m., Burgle's periscope pierced the surface, sighting the Japanese ships in the distance. Submerged and desperate to close the gap, the submarine maneuvered with painstaking precision. But the enemy stayed just out of reach, 4,800 yards, a chasm in submarine warfare. Undeterred, Burgle loosed 6 torpedoes into the void. Silence. None hit their mark. Blower struck next, her commander gambling on a submerged attack. The submarine fired 5 torpedoes at one of the towering hybrid battleship carriers and its escort, Oyodo. To the north, Bayshaw and Flasher awaited their moment. Bayshaw caught sight of the completion force, emerging ominously from a rain squall at 3:15 p.m. But the Japanese, ever vigilant, detected the submarine. A battleship carrier launched a Japanese fighter, swooping in for an attack on Bayshaw, a Mitsubishi A6M0, equipped with 2 7.7mm machine guns and a 20mm cannon. The Zero's dual-purpose guns opened fire. Bayshaw's crew scrambled to evade, executing an emergency dive as the impact shockwaves rocked the sub. The pressure hull groaned, but Bayshaw slipped into the depths, narrowly avoiding a devastating hit. Neither Bayshaw nor Flasher could re-engage, and the completion force surged forward, unbroken and defiant. The relentless pursuit of the completion force continued as Allied submarines combed the seas, engines thrumming with determination. Yet the elusive convoy slipped through their grasp, shrouded by distance and veiled in clouded waters. On February 14th, the USAAF launched another aerial strike, albeit with a diminished force of B-24 Liberator heavy bombers, B-25 Mitchell medium bombers, and P-51 Mustang fighters. The fleet, now pushing beyond the effective range of Leyte-based airfields, challenged the Allied pursuit to its limits. As the USAAF aircraft swooped into position, thick cloud cover once again thwarted the mission. The Japanese convoy remained hidden beneath a swirling, impenetrable blanket of gray, their dark silhouettes barely visible. In the chaos, USAAF pilots managed to shoot down a Mitsubishi Ki-57 Topsy transport and several Japanese fighters, but these fleeting victories did nothing to slow the completion force. Radar-directed bombing was still out of the question, with so many Allied submarines in the vicinity. They were once again forced to leave the bombers circling, with no target in sight. After hours of tense waiting, the attack force was ordered to withdraw, their payloads untouched, frustration mounting. Despite the downing of several Japanese aircraft, the USAAF's bombing campaign failed to inflict any significant damage on the fleet. But the US Navy wasn't giving up just yet. A final push. Vice Admiral Charles A. Lockwood, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet's submarine force, refused to relent after the completion force evaded earlier interception attempts in the South China Sea. He orchestrated a bold redeployment, positioning 11 submarines along the convoy's predicted route between the Luzon Strait and Japan. The trap was set, but the completion force pressed on, unbroken. By the evening of February 15th, the Japanese fleet reached the Matsu Islands at the northern edge of the Formosa Strait, anchoring briefly to regroup. Reinforcements arrived in the form of destroyers Kamikaze and Nokaze, their sleek profiles bristling with anti-submarine weaponry. The convoy's progress resumed at midnight, navigating toward Kure via Pusan and the heavily defended Shimonoseki Strait. At dawn on February 16th, USS Rasher closed in on the elusive Japanese fleet south of Wenchao, China. The tension was palpable as the crew steadied themselves for the critical strike. The submarine's commander expertly maneuvered into position, calculating the perfect moment. Then, with a sharp command, 6 torpedoes were launched at one of the escorts. Time seemed to freeze as the crew watched, hearts pounding, but the fleet's speed, 18 knots, proved too much. One by one, the torpedoes missed, cutting through the water with nothing but frustration in their wake. The Rasher's crew gritted their teeth, knowing that this moment was their best shot, and yet the Japanese fleet continued its advance. Meanwhile, Lockwood's other submarines lay in wait, poised for a strike, but the completion force veered east, slipping away just as the submarines closed in. The chase continued, each failed attack heightening the mounting frustration and tension. A bittersweet win. On February 16th, the completion force anchored off Chusan Island under fading light, weary but determined. By February 18th, they sailed to Sanzempo Harbor. Reaching Mitsukijima on February 19th, they finally docked at Kure on February 20th at 10 a.m., completing their perilous mission. These ships became some of the last Japanese warships to escape the collapsing Southwest Pacific theater. For Allied naval commanders, the operation's outcome was a bitter pill. Despite deploying 26 submarines in pursuit, the completion force emerged unscathed. Rear Admiral Fife attributed the failure to the convoy's relentless 18-knot pace, adverse weather, and advanced radar detection countermeasures aboard the Japanese vessels. In the first quarter of 1945, Japan briefly succeeded in increasing its oil imports through freighters and warships, surpassing late 1944 levels. However, Allied submarines swiftly sank most merchant tankers attempting to transport oil from Southeast Asia. By March, Japan ceased these risky imports. While this fleeting success offered some relief, it was bittersweet, as Japan's defeat and imminent surrender loomed just around the corner.